I'm Dave Schwartz, and today's guest is Chris McGill, the Card Ladder co-founder, known throughout the hobby as Chris Hoge. Several months ago made an Instagram story that I thought was really worth talking about more. It was about his personal, general collecting philosophy. I'm a big proponent not just of collecting cards, but of attempting to understand why and how and everything in between. So I reached out to Chris, and you're about to hear a conversation about collecting and process and introspection and, as I see it, intentionality. We'll get more into the in-depth part of the conversation, but first, I wanted to share Chris's 4 bullet points with you ahead of the talk to help you get in the right frame of mind for where this discussion is headed. So here are the 4, as Chris calls it, always evolving philosophy collecting points he applies to his own journey. Number 1, maintain a reasonable balance of fun, fandom, risk, and stability, but go hard if I believe in something. Number 2, collect players who stand out to me, whether because of achievements, talent, or entertainment value. Number 3, stick to cards from sets that I enjoy, primarily those with beauty and rarity. And 4th, resist the urge to tear down and rebuild. Instead, preserve foundations and build new levels on top of them. Okay, we've got the foundation of this conversation, so let's actually get to it. Welcome to the shallow end. Very excited to welcome now to the shallow end. You might know him from Card Ladder. You might know him from the old podcast House of Jordans. You might know him from the crossover. You might know him from the PSA pod. You might know him as the one who now runs the anchor leg of Sports Card Live with Jeremy Lee. Chris Hoge, did I miss anything?
I didn't even realize it was that many, so I think that was comprehensive.
Good. Well, thank you. Thanks for being here. I already gave the listeners a little background, but just maybe if somebody wanted to fast forward through the intro, many months ago, I think it was toward the end of 2024, you had a little story on Instagram of your general philosophy of collecting. And there were 4 points that you hit. And we'll get to those in just a little bit and examples of how you do it and your own collection and whatnot. But I think it's really important to think about why it was done in the first place. You know, you've had some such tremendous success, you and Christina and Josh and others with Card Ladder. Your collections are constantly growing and evolving and by any measure has been successful. But why did you decide to publish that story in the first place in which you were talking about your philosophy of collecting?
The Instagram story post is such a funny means of communicating because it's unlike anything else in social media. Like a tweet, if I put out a tweet, 3, 4, 5 people can reply to it and then they can start replying to each other. And, people could like shoot it down and just say, like, if I say something stupid or that they don't like, they can just start openly ridiculing me. And anybody who sees my tweet can click in and see it. And it's just, tweeting is like one form of expressing something. Facebook posting, sort of, once again, you have the comments section dimension to it. Putting a YouTube video out, you have the comment section again. Put a podcast out, you have the reviews section. Even making an Instagram post to your profile page, you have the comments. You can regulate it a little better than you can on Twitter and some other places. But the story post is something different. The story post is me, a bully pulpit, and no detractors. If people want to like ridicule it or make fun of it, they can screenshot it and send it to people like, oh, look how stupid this is. But they can't do it directly. They can't reply to it and have the people who originally looked at it see it. So like the story post is, first of all, a really interesting part of social media communication. And I don't know why I chose to do this through a story post, but sometimes I'm just sitting there and a thought hits me and I start getting excited. And it's always like comes from looking at cards, like I'm just looking at some cards. I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm really excited. I want to talk about these cards. Here's what's on my mind today is just kind of thinking about things through the lens of a player collector. Because like you sent me one of the screenshots from it, but I preserved the whole set. There was maybe like 5 or 6 story posts that went with it. And I preserved them as highlights to my Instagram profile. So you can see the story highlights if you go to my page. And I went back and I looked at all of them. And the context of it was I was discussing player collecting. Sort of, here's how my player collecting approach has gotten to the point that it's at now. Because I'd started with Michael Jordan, and then I branched into Luka Doncic, and then I went to Christian McCaffrey, and then I went to Le'Veon Bell, and then I went to Nikola Jokic, and then I went to Patrick Mahomes, and I went to Brock Purdy. And I think I was just kind of processing all these different changes and leaps and evolutions, or maybe not even evolutions, but just changes and rabbit holes that I'm going down. And I was just trying to figure out, what am I doing as a player collector? And for me, being a little bit more of an extroverted person, like when we were in law school, we had a professor on day one who said, some of you are extroverts and some of you are introverts. And the introverts are able to figure things out without having to say it out loud. But the extroverts need to say it. They need to hear it said. They need to say it to other people. They need other people to reply to it. And then that's how extroverts figure things out. I don't think I'm totally extroverted, but on some things, on figuring out ideas, on ideating, I am. So I put out an idea as best as I can concoct it. And then once I put it out, I can almost imagine what it looks like through other people's eyes. And, I'll go back and look at my story posts after I put it out and sort of think how other people are seeing it. And I really can't do that unless it's real. So I think really, Dave, what I was doing was I was thinking about player collecting. I was thinking about particularly how my player collecting continues to have all these offshoots and changes and evolutions. And then I just wanted to talk about it and see how people would respond to it if they even cared at all. I think that's what was going on that day.
So if I'm hearing you right, Instagram is a tool of call and response in a way. You put it out there and you know that there's going to be some response because that's what it's there for. That's what Instagram is. But even though you were expecting feedback from others, really what it was a chance for you to figure out what was going on in your own head and with your own collection. Is that right?
Yes, 100%. And it's great to hear from people too. But the process is mostly self-exploratory. And just for me as a personality type, that's kind of how I develop ideas. I have to put them out there.
That's kind of when it becomes real, because it's one thing for something to be in one's head. But once it goes from the head to the hand, to the pen, to the paper, or to the screen or whatever, that's when we start to figure out what we think. Where I work, there's a writing coach. And what the writing coach always says is, we don't write to just express ourselves. We write to figure out what we think. That's what I'm applying now to how you described why this story came to be in the first place.
Exactly. Writing as a way to structure the logic of thought is like overlooked, I think, by everybody except for writers. Writers know it. And that's like a secret cheat code that they have, is that writing is how they structure thoughts. Writing is more than just, putting sentences on a paper that sound aesthetically pleasing. Writing is concocting the logic of thought. And then writing is such a great tool because I can go back and look at what I wrote and revise it and think it through and add a sentence here and take one away there. And I think that's exactly what's happening on social media, on the story posts. Not just for me, like I'm like semi-conscious that I'm doing it, but I think for a lot of people, depending on, no matter how conscious they are of it, when they're putting ideas out, they don't fully understand why they're doing it. I don't think any of us do, but we know that we're putting ideas into the discussion forum, and it's doing something. It's causing energy to shift. People respond to it. People agree with it or disagree with it, and then a story post gets fired off a week later. That's an indirect response to it, and it just moves the conversation.
There were 4 general philosophies that came out of your thinking in that day. And the reason I'm excited to talk about it is because I think that there are some people who are listening to this who can help them kind of shape their own collection, their own philosophy. It is to understand what we do better. And I'm so glad that you put this out, because I think that it's going to kind of help others get to where they are and be a little bit less like a kite, sort of just flapping in the wind, because that's when collecting, in my opinion, becomes more rewarding. The first thing that you put, your first little bullet point item, was maintain a reasonable balance of fun, fandom, risk, and stability, but go hard if I believe in something. Do you have an example in your own collection when you were able to sort of strike that balance, or when you realized, that's it, I'm going all in on this?
Yeah. First, I just want to preempt this entire discussion of like my collecting philosophy that I was discussing at that time by saying that this is what I thought at that time worked for me. I am not saying that these are principles that are universally applicable. I'm not, even though they're phrased as universal ideas, they're generalizations, which is why I love that you asked for a particular, because that's exactly how I would want to elaborate on it. And just that this isn't advice, and I don't intend it to be like this is how somebody else should collect or something. This is me being a collector, flying my own kite, sort of. Like, reminds me of what is the Katy Perry lyric, "The bag in the wind" or something. This is just me, just floating, in the wind, trying to find a direction. So that's what's going on here. Is I'm just stumbling through it. So on this one, the idea of the balance of fun, fandom, risk, and stability, but then, sort of that's sort of like throwing it all away if like something just moves me is funny, because it's like, here's my rational approach, but then, when I get excited, it all goes out the window. But so I guess the example that I would go with, and I want to use this example because it's a totally unproven scenario right now. It could really crash and burn, or it could go well, is Brock Purdy. So Brock Purdy is a player that this is going to relate to like the fourth point, but Brock Purdy is a player that I don't think I personally could collect unless I collected all these other players before him and already had this whole other collection built up, such that, Purdy is like this off-color branch from a much larger tree. But with Purdy, what I like about him is that I really enjoy having a rooting interest in football. And I didn't always want that, but, over the last half decade, I've become really interested in player collecting in football. And my sweet spot that I just love to operate in as a collector is when there's a player who has great metrics and the media hates, and that's him. And then he also, sort of showed the intangibles I really liked, which was, his first start as a quarterback, he beat Tom Brady 35-7. I know that Tom Brady's on offense and he's on offense. They're not facing each other, but his team went against Brady's team, and it was just this massive win. And this was right around the time I started following the 49ers, because McCaffrey had just been traded there. So there was just this journey that I sort of started with the 49ers right as Purdy started it too. And then Purdy actually went on to win every game of his first regular season and every playoff game. He went all the way to the conference championship, and then he broke his arm. And so I was just so excited about him and impressed by him. But, I was still kind of sitting back and waiting. Then his second season, he led the NFL in everything. He led it in QBR, he led it in passer rating, he led it in adjusted net yards per attempt, he led it in raw net yards per attempt. I mean, the guy just was electric and phenomenal. And everybody hated him. Everybody's like, oh, this guy, So then I got and then he went to Super Bowl and he lost to Patrick Mahomes in overtime. So like by this point, I've seen the intangibles, I've seen everything. And this is where I was just like, okay, but forget it. Like, the media says this guy's not good. The hobby doesn't really seem super high on him. But man, he's checking all the boxes that I really like. I'm going to try and get some of his best cards, And like the state of my Purdy PC today is I went and I got his, for example, his select club level black one from his rookie year, which is his first appearing select card, which is a card that I really like the legacy of. I've got his Prism Black Stars 1/1 from his first year, his second year, and his third year. And then I also have been using him as an opportunity to venture into smaller, market share brands. I went and got his Panini Honors base at 1/1. That's a set that most people don't really care about. I went and got his rookies and stars, rookie year 1/1. Just like little cards like that, cheaper cards, but collecting him really gives me this opportunity to experiment and see if I really like doing stuff like that or not. So like there's actually two parallel paths where like I'm living out that go hard if I believe in something mentality. The first one is just Purdy as the player, but the second one is is trying this collecting philosophy of collecting a player's really cool cards from brands that never get mentioned or hyped or pursued when, for example, we see Instagram story posts being made. So that's like two different tracks where Purdy has provided me the opportunity to do that. And we'll see how it turns out. He wasn't so great last year.
The very end of that is, but go hard if I believe in something. I can think of moments where I thought, I should do that. And then I don't. And then later on, by some chance, I actually happen to be right. But it was by that point, it's too late and prices have soared. Were there ever players in the past, since you started, recollecting again as an adult, in which you didn't go as hard as you wished you had at a certain player, and at that point you thought, what, it's too late for me?
I usually have the opposite problem, which is that I get carried away and too excited. Rather than missing, I index too heavily on something that I believe in too much. Sort of my cup of self-confidence overflows. But there's lots of, the thing is about it is that any card that I didn't buy from when I returned to collecting in 2016 through, let's say late 2020, it was just an error. I should have just bought every card I saw, right? So, there's just, if I wanted to relive every single card, it would be all of them, man. There's, the mistake was just not believing even further and collecting cards during that window.
So the second bullet point that you had was collect players who stand out to me, whether because of achievements, talent, or entertainment value. And I want to kind of twist this one just a little bit. And if I'm imagining this like a Venn diagram with achievements, talent, or entertainment value, is there any place where it becomes an and for you, where somebody hits all three, where they're entertaining, they're talented, and they're getting all the achievements, where it's just like, okay, this is the Chris sweet spot?
Yeah, it's Michael Jordan. It's Michael Jordan, But that's I think that's for lots of people. That's the case. And the thing about Jordan too is it's just even if you weren't Venn diagramming it, it's still, Jordan is just such an obvious player to collect. His name and his brand are so synonymous with shoes and sports cards and upper deck and off court popularity and celebrity and stuff. Michael Jordan is definitely that. Other than Michael Jordan, I think when I put entertainment value into that mix, I think it was more a nod to the fact that it does matter. I recognize as a collector that it matters, but it's certainly the circle in the Venn diagram that I care the least about if it overlaps. It's the least of most. It's the one that I'm worried about the least.
I think about entertainment value. There's one player who I think about who does not check that box. And I know you've got some Chicago roots, that it's a Chicago player. When you think about late 90s, early 2000s, certain baseball players, having certain moments or tendencies that you remember, right? Ken Griffey Jr. had the backward hat. Derek Jeter had this incredible flip where he got the relay and just flipped it, and there's this iconic play, or he tumbles into the stands. The player who has achievements and talent, but I can't think of one, I have no memories of him ever doing anything on the field except taking a walk, is Frank Thomas. He's imposing. He's 6'6". He played a year as tight end for Auburn. He gets there, and he's just all stats. And in fact, the year that he finally leaves the White Sox after a decade and a half, then they go and they win the World Series. Think about that one box not being checked. It's like, what did he do? He's a great player, Hall of Famer, incredible stats. But you're right. When you think about this idea of someone needs to be fun to watch and to have those memories and the nostalgia, someone like him, there's none there for me. And I had bought a couple of his cards, a couple of years ago, and I would look at them. think, well, that's nice. What a guy. And I would just put it on eBay and think, not for me. But yeah, I mean, it's got to be fun too, right?
There is totally a gut check that happens when we start collecting a new player and we get the first few cards in. And I think we know pretty quick, am I excited and passionate about this? Is there a potential? Maybe I'm not right away, but is there a potential that I could become excited and passionate about collecting this player or this set? Or the card comes in and, it's like Josh has a story about this that always makes me laugh. From his days when he was really collecting Penny Hardaway intensely. And he was, trying to get all his favorite Hardaway cards. And one that he thought was going to be nice was the Playmakers Theater. And Playmakers Theater looks different in the different sports. And in basketball, it's a much flatter design. And it's just a much duller, more muted card. And when he got it in, he was just like, nope, no, this ain't it. This is not going to work for me. And there are some people who just love the basketball Playmakers Theater. But for him, it wasn't. And, that's the gut check. The moment when the card just comes in and it's like, nah, I just know that this isn't going to work.
Nope. And sometimes you just have to make the mistake. If you've never had a chance to see one at a show or at LCS in person, it's just like, okay, I'm going to roll the dice, hope that I like it. And then Josh's case, he did not.
Yeah, and you have to be willing to do that. You have to be willing to try because you can get pleasantly surprised too. The card can come in that it can actually be even frustrating when like a beautiful card comes in that didn't photograph well, didn't scan well. You had no idea how nice it was going to look. It comes in and you're like, man, this card is stunning. And then I sit there for 5 minutes trying to take the right video of it or trying to take the right picture of it. And I'm like, the card just isn't photogenic. I can't capture how beautiful it is to me when I hold it in hand. And we see people discuss this. Like people will say it's way nicer in hand than it looks in pictures sometimes. So you can get the opposite effect too, where you just have this card and it's magical when it's in your possession, but you can't photograph it, you can't video it. It just won't shine the right way when you're trying to take a picture of a scan.
Right, and you try getting lights, you try going outside with natural light, you try everything, it doesn't work. That's how I was with 2000 Gold Label. I'm like, oh, it's here, it's die cut, beautiful. Oh, what? It's just dull. It was dull, and I'm like, oh.
So there's like a Venn diagram too, of like the Venn diagram of photographs and scans well, and presents really well in hand and in person, and it's a card or a set or a player that you're really excited about.
All right. Well, this takes us then right into the third point of what you wrote, which was stick to cards from sets that I enjoy, primarily those with beauty and rarity. And I want to stress again that you wrote that I enjoyed. Again, this is not prescriptive for everyone. This is what you were feeling at the time. So stick with cards that you found that you enjoy with beauty and rarity. And it sounds like you touched on that a little bit with Brock Purdy. But with so many sets out there and you being so involved with Card Ladder, does it go beyond just what happens to be the most popular ones? How have you figured out what you like in terms of sets and also sort of longitudinally, not just this 1 year of this and 1 year of that? What is sort of some overall sets that you've come to love?
Yeah, this is the dumbest bullet point by far. I mean, it's just a truism, it's like, so I say I stick to things that I like. Well, what would be the opposite of that? Buying things that I don't like, it's like, what am I saying here? But I think like there is a point that I was trying to tell to myself, which is, that's a weird way to put this, but I think we talked, already in this show sort of about how social media, we're talking to ourselves to some degree when we're talking to other people too. I think I was talking to myself here saying, don't or be cautious with going too far off the trail. I think that's what I was sort of telling myself at that time. And, like, remember that the things that I love about collecting cards is that I want a beautiful and a rare card normally. Like those are winning. That's a winning recipe for me, for what I like. And it can be tempting sometimes, especially just being so immersed in card collecting, to just, zag, just constantly zagging. And eventually I can find myself so far off the trail. So where, I might actually be collecting things that I find ugly and are common. And hey, that'd be an amazing Instagram page. If somebody's Instagram page was like the ugly common cards, I would follow that page. I'd get a great thrill out of that page. But it's sort of like a reminder to myself: just stay. You like beautiful and rare cards, probably stay there. And then the best part of it all, though, and I love that Purdy has sort of been the exemplar here, is that I actually deviated from that a little bit with Purdy. So I give this this philosophy breakdown, my collecting philosophy breakdown, and it's funny. It's almost like when it's like with like player collecting. Sometimes I find that I turn the corner on becoming a fan of a player right after I reach the crescendo of hating that player, and then I turn the page. I think that kind of even happened with Jokic a little bit, where like I was just like, he's boring, I don't like him, and then all of a sudden I just turned the page, and like I had to care enough about him to hate him before I was able to also care enough about him to like him. And I think like that's almost what I'm doing when I'm talking here about my collecting philosophy is it's sort of foreshadowing the fact that somewhere subconsciously, unconsciously, I know that I'm going to have these temptations to like go pick up the Purdy Panini Honors 1/1 base set card, or the Rookies and Stars, or even at that time probably I would have said, why Prism Black Stars? Like, you like the Black Finite. Like, why are you going to the Black Stars? And then of course I do the opposite of what I instruct myself to do here. Or what I say my philosophy is. I actually end up going and building a Brock Purdy PC that's, centered around his Prism Black Stars, which like I ended up getting really excited about, because 2022 is Purdy's rookie season for cards. And it's also 2022 is the first instance that Prism introduced the Black Stars. And it's by far the least popular Prism parallel for football. So, but I find myself like really getting excited about it. And then so once I got the rookie year of Purdy, then I went and I found the second year, and then I went and found the third year. And so there's only going to be one more year of Prism football, NFL licensed, NFLPA licensed. And I hope I can get all four. Like all of a sudden I'm really excited about this. So, I that bullet point was just so amusing when I reviewed it, because it was like it's almost shallow and meaningless, and also I went against it too, and I so that's that bullet point really made me laugh when I went over it.
What did stand out to me though is mostly the word beauty, because I mean this is a 1,000-year-old cliche, right? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and there are people out there who like flux. Right. I mean, it's like Panini said, let's create a set that looks like it has hulking from the 90s and put it out, or illusions or something along those lines. But there are some, they wouldn't keep making it if people weren't buying it. And maybe it's made for the breakers. I don't know. But everyone's got their connection in some way to something. All right. We'll move on to the last one. And this is the one that really made me hang on to this story of yours, because it immediately I tied it back to myself and tendencies I have and habits that I have and things that I've done in the past. And I wanted to give it the most time, which is resist the urge to tear down and rebuild. Instead, preserve foundations and build new levels on top of them. And before I get to some specific questions, why don't you just explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to just note, it's so funny you bring up Flux, because I'm pretty sure the backstory behind Flux was that it was a production error that inspired the entire product. That card was manufactured, and the negative of it came off the printing machine, and people said, "Oh, that looks kind of cool." And literally, the whole product is the byproduct of a manufacturing error. I'm pretty sure that's true. Might have heard that from a Blez brother, even.
Then you know it's true.
Nobody loves Flux more than them. Okay. So, and this is the bullet point that like was the spawning of this discussion. But Dave, before I say anything more about it, can I ask you, what was it? Because I've certainly followed your collecting arc, and I've watched you bob and weave between player collecting, St. Louis collecting, team collecting, affinities, to Brian Jordan, affinities to different eras of cards. I've seen you navigate all different sorts of terrain as a collector. And I wonder, you as the collector, what was it about this bullet point that made you want to talk about it more?
Regret, partially. When I think about when I move to new directions, inevitably I miss some of what I've moved on from. And part of the reason that happens is just impatience, where I'm like, well, I want what I see now, so I move. But in order to move, I have to demolish something else. And part of it is just based on my budget for collecting, where if I want something, I've got to move quick, I have to sell something. So I would describe my collection as almost like one of those old European cities where they excavate and they found another one underneath and they excavate again. It's like, oh, here's another one that's from like 3,000 years ago. And there are remnants of what I used to collect. And as I've gotten deeper and further into collecting, I do that less. I do less full renovation and instead hang on to a few things that I know I'm going to regret. I have a better sense now of what it is that I'm going to regret if I move. And in fact, just in the last month, I discovered Veriswap, right? And I ended up making a trade on there, and somebody was asking for a card that I had that I've already moved 2 other times, and I've now acquired it for a 3rd time. It's a 2001 Topps Chrome Barry Bonds Gold Retrofractor. Pretty low pop, just a beautiful, stunning card. And the card that I acquired or was trying to acquire in this trade, the person was asking for that card. And I thought, I can't move this again. And it was holding me up from moving it a 3rd time. And I knew what that was going to drive me nuts. And then I realized that he was asking for it to bring up the value, to make the trade value more even, not because he actually wanted the card. And a year or 2 ago, I would have said, all right, I want this other card. And I would have sort of thrown it in. But I realized that there was that sense of that recognition was there. And I was able to instead swap it out, say, how about this card instead of this Bonds card? And the guy accepted like in 30 seconds, like, sure. And it was like a relief, right? But there are cards and areas of my collection that I have gotten rid of over since I got back, 5 years ago now, that I kind of kick myself over. And I think it's those regret type of moves that I connected it to this statement of yours. This idea of don't get rid of everything, hang on to something so that you can, almost like cookie crumbs, like Hansel and Gretel, trace it back to where you started so you can draw a line from where you were to where you are.
Oh, that's poetic. I want to say that I'm going to give rationalizations for why this is a collecting philosophy that I think works for me, and it may have where you may have a similar one, other people may also. But I think it's really just born, as many things are, out of just a personality trait, flaw, or whatever. Because I suddenly, as I'm talking to you right now, I'm thinking about the fact that when I was a kid, I had a real problem with throwing out old pairs of shoes. My mom would, be like, look, you got some new shoes. You need to throw out your old pair now. These are 2 years old. I just couldn't do it. I just wanted a closet full of shoes. I would not want to get rid of any of these shoes. And I just think there's probably like that is the precondition for all of this, is that I've always wanted to hang on to things and keep things. I did get rid of those shoes, by the way, and I was better off for it. So it's just it's
Mom knows. Mom always knows.
Mom always knows. Mom also didn't throw away my card collection, which was a big. She knew to preserve that. That really was a life-altering decision. Okay, so the idea here, I love the city's metaphor. Because that really sketches out the 2 main paths. The one and all of this is happening with the constraint of a finite budget, which virtually everyone has that constraint. The level of finiteness, finitude, I don't know. The level of restriction is different, but we all have it. We all have to make trade-offs. We all have to make decisions. And the two paths that are before us are, the one path is the European city that sits on top of a previous European city that sits on top of a previous European city. But in order for the newest one to be there, the old one had to be replaced. And in order for the old one to be replaced, the oldest one had to be replaced. And so on this plot of land, there have been 3 different cities, but they've been replacements or improvements or excavations to discover what once was there. And then the other approach, and the approach that I was advocating as part of my collecting philosophy, was I'll build a town here, and then I've chartered this town and I've filled it with a few thousand people, and now I'm going to go explore. And I'm going to leave that town there. I'm not going to take the resources. I'm not going to take the people. I'm going to go see a new terrain. And then I go there and, oh, this is a nice terrain. I'm going to set up here for a few years, and we're going to build a new town here. And I want this town to be bigger. Like this, there's a nice view of the river here. So let's build up this town. And maybe that town gets to 20,000 people. And then I say, you know what? I'm bored with this. I'm ready to move on. And I get to a new place, and I'm like, okay, this is full of natural resources. This has the ability to be a city. I need to go back and grab some people from my second town and grab some people from my first town. And like, we need to really build this city up. And like, I'm going to divert more resources here, but I still want to keep that first town, that second town, because now all these towns, they're forming like a county. And then after we've built these 3 towns, and one's bigger, one's smaller, I've taken some resources from the smaller ones, put in the bigger ones. And I'm like, okay, I want to go to the whole other side of this land. I want to go far away from here, but I want to keep these 3. So we've got this county. Well, now I want to build this town over here. And before you know it, I've built 5, 6, 7, 8 towns. And sometimes I take resources from one town and maybe put them towards another, but I build new towns along the way. And none of my towns are ever going to be as majestic or glorious or impressive as the concentration of a beautifully renovated city that had all the resources dedicated to just renovating this important, historic, amazing plot of land that just keeps getting built up and built up. And yes, the old had to be destroyed to build up the new, but we're concentrating all the resources. So like, this is just this efficient, compact, beautiful city. Whereas I have this spread out, assemblage of towns that are connected, and there are paths leading from one town to the other, but none of these towns can rival the great city. And so I've gone for more of the town path, where I started with Michael Jordan, and that was sort of like my first town. And then I went, I said earlier in the show, the different list of all the different players I've gone through, and some of those towns got built up a lot more than others. But for whatever reason, I have really enjoyed preserving all those towns, even when at various points I could tear one down and take all the resources and take all the people from that town and build up a different town and make it even better. I've largely sought to preserve those towns. Okay, so let me stop talking in the metaphor and start talking in the context of the cards. So with the cards, here's one of the things that I've found that's a really nice byproduct of keeping all of my different collections, preserving and building on top of what I have rather than tearing down and like going all in over and over and over again. What's been preserved is access to lots of different communities and types of collecting and mindsets. So like when I started collecting Michael Jordan, I was a far less experienced collector, made lots of different decisions, had a very different perspective. I was much more narrowly focused, and I made a lot of decisions and thoughts and charted a path that led me to a collection that I probably would never get to today. But there's something that I want to preserve about that, because it's a part, that collection reflects a style of collecting that I did, that I think lots of other people do too, especially who are going through that same arc that I did. And I like being connected to that. And I like having access to that mindset. I like having access to that collection I built up, even though if I had to do it over, I might not do it the same way. I like having access to it. It allows me to stay connected to those people, to that level of a collector, to someone with that experience. I really like it. And then once I have that foundation, I'm really confident in that. I think is a process that keeps me connected, insulated, part of this Michael Jordan collecting community. Then I feel like really confident that I can branch out into other things that wouldn't make sense if I didn't have Michael Jordan first. So like one thing that's really important to me as a collector is I really, like, as I said on the second bullet point, achievements is something that I really value. So me as a collector, like my whole philosophy crumbles if I don't collect the player who I think is the most achieved, the guy with the most achievements. But once I have a nice collection of that guy, then all of a sudden I can, start doing Jokic, which is like, well, this guy's not as accomplished as Michael Jordan, but maybe he'll get close. And I've had a fun time following that journey along the way. But for me personally, it doesn't make sense for me to be a Nikola Jokic collector if I'm not a Michael Jordan collector already. Being a Michael Jordan collector lets me get into this Nikola Jokic collection. Or like in football, I eventually started building a Mahomes collection because that's where all of my collecting philosophy was pointing me. It's like, I really love the Panini era. I'm already nostalgic for it. I think Patrick Mahomes is the most important player to come out of it from any sport. All my collecting arrows are pointing me in that direction. And then once I have Mahomes, and I really feel like I have a foundation of Mahomes cards, then it makes a little more sense for me to add a Brock Purdy to it. But it doesn't make sense for me to be a guy who's big on achievements and stuff, and then I'm ignoring Patrick Mahomes, who checks all the boxes that I care about and who has amazing cards. So like, I'll stop after this. My favorite parallel of the Panini era, I've been thinking about this a lot for months, and I think I've settled on the select premier level die cut black 1/1. I know that it's not the most popular. I know some people actually hate it, but the thing that just settled me on this one was that anytime I would be looking at a marketplace of cards for sale, anytime I'm at a show browsing display cases, anytime I'm on social media and I'm just looking at pages, whenever I would see a premier level select die cut black 1/1, it just stopped me. I was just like, I really like that. That is a really beautiful card to my eye. And thinking about that was one of the things that sort of got me so excited about Mahomes too, because that card for Mahomes from his rookie year became available about a year and a half ago now. And that's what started my Mahomes collecting, was like, I think this is, one of, if not my favorite card from the Panini era. Mahomes, I think, is one of, if not the most significant athletes from this era. Here is the combination of two things that I really believe in. And I mean, it was served up on a platter. So I went for that. And then I enjoyed the card as much as I thought I would. And then I went and I got the second year too. And then I'm trying to get the third year, which is the last year that I care about. Like, I feel like Select has a window from depending upon basketball or football, but 2014 to 2019 is this window where Select, I thought, was like the right configuration. And they started adding these tiers and all these extra parallels. So like for Mahomes, he has 3 years of it that I love, 17, 18, and 19. I've got 2 of the 3. I'm really trying to pursue the 2019. But anyway, that's sort of how the collecting, my collecting has scaffolding. Things build on top of other things. Things connect to other things. Things make a lot more sense in my personal collection once other things are in place. And then I really worry, just like the child version of myself who was worried about throwing away my old shoes. I get really worried about, if I lose the Michael Jordan piece, do any of these other pieces make sense anymore? Or does the whole thing come crumbling down? And I'm pretty convinced that it all comes crumbling down. If everything is connected and built on top of itself, just like a home with renovations built on it. And if you take away the main floor, all of it can come crashing down.
Which so much of it's interesting you said that, because there's some collections out there, myself included sometimes, where it feels like my house has a third story, but no second and first story. And it's just sitting there hovering. And at some point you're going to realize gravity's going to happen, right? And boom, it's going to come crashing down. But it almost sounds like pruning in a way too. And I'm
Well,
thinking,
Dave, how do you know when you feel like you only have a third floor, but you don't have the main floor or the second floor? And how do you know when you do have the main floor? Like when do you have that sense of the foundation is actually there?
for me, it's almost like a self-awareness of like a feeling, like a very visceral feeling I get when I look at my collection. So last year, I got rid of about 92% of my collection because I was going after a card that I really, really wanted. And I felt like my collection could not even begin until I had this card. And like everything else was a waste of time, was a waste of money, was a waste of resources. And the National, I got it. I picked it up. And then I enjoyed it, and I still enjoy it. I love it. It's great. I love it. I'm so glad that I did it. But I have spent about the last 10 months now, that we're about 2 months away from the National, I've spent this past calendar year, or not calendar year, 12 months, whatever, since National, going back and getting the stuff that I missed having to get rid of to get this card, because it was all I had was this card. I didn't really have a collection. And without being able to point to anything tangible, it was just a feeling of incompleteness. And so I'm sort of have referred to this 12-month period between the 2024 National and the 2025 National as my period of recovery, because I'm just about there, right? I'm just about there. In fact, I mentioned Veriswap before. The card that's incoming is the one that hurt the most to get rid of for this this Leaf Jackie Robinson that I went for last year at National. And now, once that card is back, it's almost like, I'm going to date myself, it's almost like Bobby Ewing waking up in the shower in Dallas when everyone thought he was dead for 4 years. And he's like, well, hello. It's like I'm back, like I'm awake again. And now I can start thinking forward again instead of backward.
That's such an interesting component of it, that like when we make certain big decisions that are collection altering, that we can, in the wake of that, shift into this backward looking sentiment, and instead of being able to look forward, which is just mind boggling, because the whole enterprise of collecting up until that point was looking forward to this amazing card to add. And then all of a sudden, once you have it, now there's was it Janus, the mythological figure who has a face that looks forward and looks back? Okay, so now like you're Janus and you're looking forward and back at the same time. And I'm so fascinated by that, but just because I've never had that experience. I've always, because probably of my hoarding, maybe, or whatever, where just like this like it's very difficult for me to part with a card. And once I do make the decision to part with it, there's something psychologically where that card is just dead to me, and I don't want it back. And I never really have this sentimentality of like wanting to go get it back. And maybe that's just because I've been lucky enough to not sell cards that I would ever want to try and get back. But instead, I've been able to identify the stuff to prune that I never really cared about in the first place. I took a try, but I didn't really like it. But I've always like had this very forward-looking, the boulders rolling down the hill momentum with collecting. And it's actually like mind-boggling how different, how it would just like freeze me in my tracks if suddenly I had this sense of looking back and saying, I need to retrace some steps here, and I need to go through another path again.
Chris, this has been awesome. Thank you for the conversation. I greatly appreciate it. Just tell people already know, but tell them again, when can they hear the crossover? And just go ahead and why don't you plug Card Ladder?
Yeah, great. Okay, so the crossover is a show that purportedly happens weekly, but we take a few off now and again. And that show, we're actually in the midst of changing platforms. We're going to try and move over to YouTube and hopefully get some microphones going and increase our sound quality a little bit. So for right now, I would just say and this will tie in with Card Ladder, just check out the Card Ladder YouTube channel. That channel should start hosting live streams of all the crossover episodes, which previously had been taking place on Instagram. And then from the Card Ladder YouTube channel, you can learn about Card Ladder if you'd like. There's plenty of other Card Ladder stuff there, but we'll see, man. I am not sure how our YouTube transition is going to go, but we'll see.
Chris McGill, Chris Hoge on Instagram. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.